Welcome to the Chaos and Light podcast. I am your host, Angela Levesque, and on this show, we explore mind, mystery, and human potential. On today's episode, we have Joseph Holmes, and he shares with us some wonderful stories about his decades-old relationship with Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary. I actually don't speak too much in this episode, but you will find yourself mesmerized by his story and his ability just to be fully present. I also think this episode is a great follow-up to many of the themes we've been touching on about self-containment and connection and self-awareness. So I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't checked out chaosandlight.com, you should. There's a fantastic new moving meditation there that allows you to work with Metatron's cube and gives you a little guide on how to work with it. So if you haven't checked that out, please do so at chaosandlight.com. Well, we will be back after this ridiculously short break with Joseph Holmes. Are you enjoying this podcast and want to help this lady out? Well, share it with friends, or even better, leave a review on iTunes. We'd love to hear from you. Now back to the show. I am here today with Joseph Holmes. He's a mindset juggernaut, spiritual warrior, best-selling author, mystic, and international speaker. He helps people come out of their angel closets and discover the gift they were born to give the world, how to share that gift, and how to fearlessly deal with the inevitable doubts and fears that end up holding people back from creating a life of meaning, significance, joy, love, and success. So with that, I want to welcome Joseph Holmes to the Chaos and Light podcast. How are you, Joseph?
I'm great, Angela. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. I was really struck by your story when you reached out to me. So that's where I'd like to start. Can you please share with my listeners the story that brought you to do the work that you do today?
Well, I had in 1988, I went over and I had befriended a man named John Lawrence. Some of your listeners may know of John, Reverend John Lawrence. In 1988, he was in his 90s at the time. And we had befriended each other at the church we were both attending at the time. And one Sunday, he invited me over to his house. And I wanted to get to know him more and hear his story. He's 90 years old, right? So I went over and he wanted to meditate. So we sat down, we had a coffee table in between us. And we started meditating. And during the course of the meditation, his foot kicked the leg of the coffee table. And, he was in his 90s, so I wanted to make sure he was okay, but I didn't want to interrupt the meditation. So I just barely opened my eyes. And what I saw was that he was looking, wide-eyed like he'd seen a ghost. He was looking just above my head. Well, I knew he was okay, and I didn't want to interrupt anything, so I just closed my eyes and went back to meditation. After the meditation, we chatted for a while, and it was time to go. He excused himself, and he went into his room, and he brought out this crucifix, and he gave it to me as a present. And he said, while we were meditating, I saw this hovering above your head. Well, I'm not religious. I am spiritual, but I'm not religious. So at the time, I didn't know what to make of it, but what a great present, right? So I took it and I went out to my car. And when I got into my car, when you get in your car and you close the door, well, that's what I did. I closed the door. But when I closed the door, there was this bam! And the entire vehicle was engulfed in a bubble of white light. Now, back in 1988, the white light was making headlines. Everybody thought that was the ultimate spiritual experience. And anyway, Angela, I cannot tell you how I got home. All I know is I got home. I remember the vehicle feeling as if it was 3 feet off the ground. But after that, I can't tell you how I got home. But when I got home, I sat down to eat and I took a forkful of food and I brought it to my mouth and I could only get it about 12 inches from my mouth. The vibration of the white light bubble was so refined compared to the vibration of the food that the food couldn't penetrate it. So for a week, I subsisted on freshly made juices that I could only take, I don't know why, I could only take through a straw at the side of my mouth. Well, after a week, the white light kind of went away, and I went into a depression because you can imagine being in this white light for a week and then having to come out and deal with the mundane world again. Um, so that's what kind of opened things up for me. There's a few things that happened before that, but uh, that was the main conscious event that I had as an adult. And so because of this depression I went into, I thought, it's nice to be in that white light. I'm wondering if there's a technique I can learn that where I can just go into it, right? Of course, that's my ego talking. And anyway, so a few years later, I attended this 1 week workshop for that reason. I was hoping perhaps I could learn how to get into this white light whenever I wanted to. Anyway, the workshop started on a Sunday. The next Wednesday, we had this breathing session, deep breathing. And it was at night. There was maybe 12, 15 of us in a room. The lights were out. We were on our backs and we just started this deep breathing. And during the course of the breathing, I opened my eyes and I saw the outline of a pair of eyes. And I thought they were my mother's because she had passed away a few years earlier, but I couldn't tell for sure. That's all I saw were the eyes. But anyway, I continued breathing. And then when the facilitator said, okay, in 10 minutes, I'm going to turn the lights on. So everybody start to, gathering yourself together. And, but when he said that, the eyes expanded and it was Mother Mary. And for those 10 minutes, she just beamed me with just beams of gold and white light. Again, I'm not a religious person, so I knew it was good. It felt good, and it was Mother Mary, so nothing to worry about. And anyway, at the end of the 10 minutes, she was gone, and that was on a Wednesday. On Friday, I had an out of body. I didn't know what she was doing for those 10 minutes. I mean, I figured it was a blessing, but for what, why, I didn't know. So 2 nights later, I have this out of body experience. And we're traveling, and I have a guide with me. We're traveling. And we went into, for lack of a better word, these light regions that made the white light that I had experienced back in 1988 and made the white light pale in comparison. And we're in these light regions. And then there was this light way beyond us that I thought we were going to. And my guide stopped me and he said, we can't go there. He said, well, you can't go there. And I said, well, why not? I want to. He says, no, you'll combust if you try and go into that light. So I came back into my body, and for 5 solid months, I was in these light regions. I could not work. I was just in this pure state of joy. And I explained it to a Catholic one time, and he said, oh, yeah, you were in a state of rapture. And I thought, well, that's a good word, rapture. So I was in a state of rapture for 5 solid months. I mean, Angela, I would go, I'm a kind of a quiet guy. I would walk into the supermarket and without any warning, just out of the blue, just start giggling with this joy and this laughter. And people would stop and look at me, but I had no control over it. Well, what I later found out was that that light that my guide had told me I couldn't go to, I didn't know it at the time, but that light was the light of Mary Magdalene. Now I had been graced by Mary Magdalene when I was a child, but this was the second time I had been graced by her. And both times I didn't know it was Mary Magdalene at the time. But anyway, so and then I came out of those light readings after 5 months, and you can imagine, I mean, another depression because being in that state and now having to deal with this mundane world again. So I swore off trying to get into any white light or light regions or anything. I said, no more. It's just, I can't handle the difference. Well, a few years later, I heard they were having a breathing workshop at the Mission San Luis Rey in Oceanside, California. That's one of the 21 original California missions. It's one of the most beautiful ones, and it's associated with Mother Mary, not Mary Magdalene. So I thought, well, okay, if I take the breath work, maybe I'll have another vision of Mother Mary. And I thought that might be helpful for me. So I decided to take the workshop, and I had a martial arts school at the time. So the workshop started on Saturday. So Friday, I announced to my class, I just said, I'm going to be at a workshop this weekend, so there won't be any Saturday classes. That's all I said. And so when I thought everybody was gone, I was locking up. One of the parents came up to me and she said, why are you taking the workshop? And Angela, without thinking, out of my mouth came, oh, to meet Mary Magdalene. So I remember driving home and I'm thinking, Mary Magdalene? I don't have any interest in Mary Magdalene. I'm going there to meet, hopefully, Mother Mary. So that just baffled me why that came out of my mouth like that. Well, anyway, next morning, we're in the workshop and the facilitator says, okay, we're going to do some breath work and we're going to do it sitting in the chairs. And, my ego's thinking, no, this is not going to work. It has to be like it was the first time at night in a dark room, lights out. Here we are, 8 a.m. The room is full of light, and we're going to do it sitting up. I said, this is not going to work. This is what I'm thinking. I'm not interrupting the session or anything. But, I go along with it. I sit in the chair, and we're doing this deep breathing, and there's this double wide door without any doors on it, and Mother Mary sticks her head around the corner, smiles, and she's just just flies up in front of me, and she's got Mary Magdalene with her. And they're wearing these long black capes, which I have no idea why they're wearing them. But when we get into doubts and fears, this will all make sense. But they start circling me with these black capes, and they're giggling and laughing and wrapping me in these black capes and just being silly, having fun with me. And then Mother Mary says, I want you to lie down on the floor. And everybody's sitting in the chairs. So I'm thinking, no. And right at that time, the facilitator said, okay, everybody lie on the floor. So we're lying on the floor. I have my head in Mother Mary's lap, and Mary Magdalene is hovering above me. And she enters my body, and she heals me of my childhood molestations. Now, I was in my 40s at the time. I had never told anybody about my childhood molestations. But she healed me of them to the point where I could begin talking about them. I could begin writing about them, you know, which if any listeners have been molested, one of the key elements of healing is to be able to talk about and write about it, speak about it. Anyway, so then Mary Magdalene came out of my body, and then Mother Mary says, we have to go now. And they left. And I'm thinking, my ego, now you would think I would be grateful, right? Which I was, but my ego says, they didn't even say goodbye. And the moment I thought that, Mary Magdalene sticks her head around the corner, comes up and holds my face in her hands. And she just gives me a peck on the lips, nothing romantic or anything, just, like a friend, just a peck on the lips. And she smiles and she says, you silly boy. And she's gone. Well, that was in around 19, was around 2003. And so from 2003 and 2012, I would occasionally have a visit from Mary Magdalene. And then in December 2012, she woke me up at 2 a.m. Mary Magdalene woke me up at 2 a.m., told me to sit at my table with a yellow pad and a pen. And then she began dictating her quatrain poetry, 4 stanzas, and just nonstop. And she's been doing that every morning since December 2012. So that's why I have 45 books on Amazon, 45 and counting, because I don't know what to do with all these. They just keep coming and coming. And so now in that first night, the first night she woke me up, I said, do you mind if I call you Maggie? I said, I know Maggie's not a nickname for Magdalena, but next to Melissa, Maggie's one of my favorite names. And she said, of course, you can call me Maggie. So we began calling these poems at that time, love notes from Maggie, just to give them a title and keep them organized. Well, this was in December, right? So in April, so just a couple months later, I began to have serious doubts about this. I'm thinking, oh, come on. These aren't coming from Mary Magdalene. People are going to think I'm crazy, So I gave her an ultimatum. I said, one morning, I said, I want a burning bush. I want something that nobody can argue about. I want proof that these are coming from you. And, a day went by, nothing happened. A week went by, nothing happened. But the poems kept coming every morning. So I just kind of, okay, she's not going to answer me. She's ignoring me. So that was in April. In July, she says, I want you to begin publishing these. So I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to publish these, I should maybe get some reviews. And I didn't want to go to my friends because, I wanted some good, honest reviews, good or bad. And so I went to this website. And this website has thousands of people who provide different services. And I think, well, okay, I'll find some people on here. I'll pay them for their time. I won't pay them for a review. I mean, if they want to give me a review, good or bad, that's fine. So I start reading people's bios, and I think, no, this isn't going to work. This is taking forever. So, I'm a very visual person. So I just started going through the photos real fast. And I came on this photo of this woman, and I looked down, and her name's Angelina. And she provided the service. It wasn't book review or anything. But Maggie Mary Magdalene, Maggie told me, send her an email. So I sent her an email, and all I said, Angela, all I said was, I have some poems. I'll pay you for your time to read them. If you moved enough to give me a review, good or bad, I would appreciate it. So she writes back and she says, well, no, that's not what I do. So you would think there's thousands of people, I would move on, right? But Maggie says, no, you stay with her. So we went back and forth for 2 or 3 days. Finally, Angelina writes back and she says, fine, send me some poems. So when I send her the poems this time, that's when I tell her about Mary Magdalene. And we're calling the poems Love Notes from Maggie, because I call Mary Magdalene Maggie. Right? Well, she writes back the next day and she says, Joseph. I mean, I still see it. She says, Joseph, I have to tell you this. She says, you're not going to believe me. She says, but my name is Angelina, because that's what my father wanted to call me. But when I was born, my mother wanted to name me Mary Magdalena. And my birth certificate, on my birth certificate, is Mary Magdalena.
Wow.
And she said, and she said, when I was growing up in Greece, one day, one of my best friends called me Maggie, and I loved it. So from that point on, only my best friends called me Maggie. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, Maggie's not a nickname for Magdalena, is it? I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it is over in Greece. And she said, no, it's not. She said, but one day, one of my best friends called me Maggie and it stuck. So she sent me a copy of her passport to prove that her real name is Mary Magdalena. So I remember reading that email and then looking down again at her name. Angelina, Angel, Ina. I thought, my God, that's the angel from Maggie. That's my burning bush. Right? And so that was my burning bush. And then the next day, the next morning, Maggie sends me this poem. She says, ah, Joseph, when things like this happen, it is magical and fun. Angelina to Magdalena to Maggie. Who would have thought? And from across the sea. And we even look alike. So run, my dear, and jump and sing, that when you look at her, you're seeing me. Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
yes. And so, so this is an important point, Angela, for your listeners. You would think after that experience, I would never have any doubt after that, right? But that's not the, when you start following your dreams, that's not how ego works. Ego's main objective is to keep you out of your heart and in your head, where all your doubts and fears live. So your ego never really goes away. Now, the first time I gave Maggie an ultimatum, every time since then, she doesn't wait. She just sends me, she just sends me a sign, said, like slapping me in the face, stop doubting, right? Uh, so uh, I'll tell you the very first time I was graced by Mary Magdalene when I was 7 years old. And we lived in San Diego, and my cousins and grandparents lived in Phoenix. So every summer we would take a road trip to Phoenix and visit them. And on the way back, we'd always stop someplace as a side trip. So this one summer, we stopped in Nogales, Arizona. Now, to a 7-year-old kid, Nogales was neat because Nogales, Arizona, right across the border was Nogales, Mexico. They had the same name. I thought that was cool. Right. Anyway, we get in Nogales, Arizona late at night. We go right to bed. And the next morning, my two brothers, my parents are up getting ready to walk to breakfast, and I'm still in bed. I'm lying on my back. And this feeling of peace enters the top of my head and flows through my body and up my feet. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was it felt good, so I wasn't afraid. Other than that, today I call it a wave of grace, but then I just call it this peace flowing through me. Well, I finally got up and we were walking to breakfast and we were on the street corner waiting for the light to turn green to cross the street. And it happened again to me. I didn't tell anybody about it. Well, so after this burning bush in July, uh, a few months later, I started having doubts again. The next morning, Maggie says, look up Carlos Castaneda. Now, I have a degree in anthropology.
I'm very familiar with him. So
Yes. For your listeners who aren't, Carlos Castaneda was a doctoral student at UCLA in the early 60s. And he would go out to the Sonora Desert in Arizona, and he met a shaman called Don Juan, and he was initiated into all the practices of the shamans. And he wrote a doctoral thesis on it, which became a book, which became an international sensation, and all the books that followed. Well, the great controversy with Carlos was that his critics said he made all that up, right? And Don Juan was just a fictional character. And Carlos had said, no, I first met Don Juan at the bus station in Nogales, Arizona. And they said, no, you're lying. The Don Juan is fictional. Well, so that was the controversy. And so because I read all those books and I knew quite a bit about Carlos Castaneda. When Maggie told me to look up Carlos, I'm thinking, why? I know just about all there is to know about him. But anyway, I Google it and I'm reading, stuff that I already know. But on the sidebar, there's a caption that says, I can verify Carlos's meeting with Don Juan at the Nogales bus station. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I clicked on that. So it's a story about this American who was friends with Carlos. He knew who he was, who had been traveling in Mexico. And he was getting close to the border when he got sick. So rather than cross over while he was sick, he decided to stay in the suburb of Nogales, Mexico, to recover. And so once he recovered, then he crossed over. And the importance of that is if he had not stopped to recover, he would have missed the meeting. So once he recovered, he crossed over the Nogales border. And he was at the bus station to catch a bus. And he saw Don Juan meeting with Carlos Castaneda, the town that he recuperated in. The name of the town is Magdalene. So now, whenever I have a doubt, that's how Maggie takes care of it. So she'll have you go through these experiences because she knows that later on you're going to have these doubts. And so it gives her a reference point to dissolve your doubt with. So that's just one of the times. I don't have any doubts anymore, but in the first few years, I would occasionally start getting doubts again. And so that's how she handled it. She would just give me these experiences, especially with the long black capes that they appeared. That was another a setup she made for me so she could get rid of any doubts I had later on. But that's how it all started.
Well, I have no doubt that I'm supposed to be talking to you because, as I told you before we started recording, that my cat, she showed up out of nowhere at 6 months, just came sauntering into my backyard, and for some reason I wanted to call her Magdalena, and then I decided to call her Maggie for short. And it was funny because we were doing some yard work at that time, and right after I decided, I'm like, Magdalena, but let's call her Maggie. Maggie May by Ron Stewart came on
Oh
the
yeah, sure. One of my
came on the
favorite
radio. I
songs.
was like,
Right,
interesting.
right.
And so I think that that's funny that you share that story. Also, my listeners know I talk about Carlos Castaneda all the time, so
Sure,
I
sure,
enjoy that synchronicity as well. Is
sure. Well, the other song by Rod Stewart, the Rhythm of Your Heart. Do you know that one?
yes,
That's one of my favorite ones too, because you know your ego, ego is just an acronym for edging God out, and ego always wants to keep you out of your heart. And so that's one of the songs, the things I use. If I'm down or something, I'll put that song on, Rhythm of Your Heart, especially the video of it at the Royal Albert Hall, I think it is in South Kensington. Um, it's just a beautiful song, and it just gets you right back into your heart. Um, but yeah, what I like to emphasize with your listeners, Angela, is your ego will always create doubts, especially when you start following your heart, following your bliss. And that's I have this matrix now. It's the trinity of creating a life full of meaning, significance, joy, love, and success. And on the top of that is coming out of your angel closet. And I don't know if maybe you'll agree with me, but I believe billions of people have their own angel stories, but they're intimidated about sharing them because, like me, like I was in the beginning, people are going to think I'm crazy, right? But I believe it's important that you come out of your angel closet, and you can do that safely with people you really trust. You don't have to do it publicly or anything, because once you do that, you set up the groundwork to begin healing trauma, any trauma that's in your life, and also to discover what your gift is. And once you discover what your gift is, then you can begin sharing it. But once you start sharing your gift with the world, that's when all the doubts and fears start really coming in. So the first book, my my most popular book, is called The Power of Angels, Volume 3. But the first part are my angel stories, because I want to encourage people to come out of their angel closets. And then the second part of the book are the poems by Mary Magdalene. And the poems deal with discovering your life purpose, discovering your gift, healing trauma, and then dealing with the doubts and fears that come along with all that. So,
well, if somebody says to you, but how do I figure out what my gift or purpose is? What would you say to that?
I think you have to experiment. I know there's a lot of cliches, simple cliches. Uh, your gift, I think Steve Harvey says your gift is what you do the easiest with the least amount of effort, and that, sure, that's a catchy phrase. Uh, but my story is, I went to college, I got a degree. Uh, I went into my own business thinking that that was my gift. And then 8 years later, I had a complete nervous breakdown. I live on, uh, I have 5 acres here in the country, and all I could do was just work the soil for 2 straight years. So obviously that wasn't my gift, and I had to learn that the hard way. Not that I recommended that, but some people may have to go through things like that.
When you talk about your nervous breakdown, where is that in the timeline of the story you just shared? Was that before you really
Sure.
1988 or?
That was 2 years later. So the white light, um, I think it kind of protected me. Uh, the nervous breakdown could have been far worse. I mean, it was bad enough, but I think it could have been far worse if it did not have that anchor of that experience of being in the white light. If I had not had that, I think, I don't know what would have happened. Yeah. So it was the white light, the nervous breakdown, and then 3 years later, uh, the vision of Mother Mary going into the light regions, seeing the light of Mary Magdalene, which at the time I didn't know it was her, and then uh, so, and progressed from there.
So going back to the question about how does somebody know their gift or purpose, if it's not
Well,
what comes easiest, how would you describe what it is?
I should emphasize that when Mary and Mary Magdalene come to me, they come to me as spiritual beings without any religious dogma. But there are parts in the Bible that what Steve Harvey calls simple scripture. And, if you look around nature, everything in nature is simple. It's just, everything's simple, you know. We may not understand a lot of things, but it's simple. And so simple scripture says that your gift will make room for you. Now, it doesn't say your passion will make room for you. It doesn't say your education will make room for you. It doesn't say uh, your finances will make room for you. It says your gift will make room for you. So what is your gift? And again, it's not necessarily what you're passionate about. Your passion won't make room for you. Your gift will make room for you. So it may require some experimentation, but it's going to be unique for everybody, how each person finds what it is. But that's why I love that song by Rod Stewart, The Rhythm of Your Heart, because I'll lay down at night and put some ear pads on and listen to that song. The rhythm of your heart, tune into the rhythm of your heart. Now, how do you know if it's your heart talking to you or your ego? Well, first of all, your heart comes from a state of love. Your ego always comes from fear. And ego shows up in many disguises, jealousy, fear, anger, bullying, doubts, but love is just love. And it may take some practice. The point is you have to delve in. You have to dare to what I call walk your road to Rome. All roads lead to Rome, right? Dare to walk your road to Rome. And when you get on your road to Rome, ego is going to throw up all these roadblocks. And the way I deal with ego now, I used to fight it. And what I learned, when you fight with ego always wins. Because that's what ego loves to do. It loves to create turmoil. So I got to a point, I said, something, I'm going to make friends with my ego. So now when ego comes up in the form of fear or criticism or jealousy or whatever.
Judgment?
I just say thank you for reminding me to drop back into my heart. I go back to my heart. Now, in the beginning, that was happening a lot, but now it doesn't happen so much. I try and stay in my heart most of the time. But, ego is very clever, right? So, you just have to catch it, say thank you, don't criticize it. It's your friend. Thank you for reminding me to go back to my heart. So you just have to know what lights up your heart. It's like a model walking down the runway. What lights up the runway, right? What comes out of that model that lights up the runway? What comes out of you that lights up your world? You know, you may not know that until you start trying different things, you know, but don't be afraid to try. Just dare, and then ask, you know. Steve Harvey also said, simple scripture says, you have not because you ask not, right? It doesn't say you have not because of your past lives, you know. It doesn't say you have not because of your PTSD. It doesn't say you have not because you're flawed, right? All that stuff is complicated. It simply says you have not because you ask not. So what's the solution? The solution is to simply ask. Now, simply ask means ask one time, you can know that God is taking it from there. You don't have to keep asking God 100 times every day. Ask once and then have fearless faith that God is taking it from there. So the simple question is, what's my gift? Right? And then let it be. Now, you can take all your askings, because you may have one asking besides what your gift is. You can take all your askings and make them into affirmations. And you can repeat your affirmations 1,000 times a day if you want to, because you repeat your affirmations for you, not for God. God heard your question. God already knows, and God's on it. And God's going to take care of it in God's time. But you repeat your affirmations to keep you out of your head where your doubts and fears live, and keep you in your heart where your imagination lives. God doesn't give you what you want. God gives you what you can imagine. So, and then the third simple scripture that Steve Harvey and I really like is he says, the simple scripture says that those without vision shall perish. And to write your vision down and make it plain, that means make it simple. So those who see it shall run to it. So that other simple scripture, your gift will make room for you. The other part of that, your gift will make room for you and bring you into the company of extraordinary souls. The people that you're going to need to fulfill your purpose in life, right? So instead of chasing after people, chasing after success, surrender to your gift. Virginia Woolf had a great line, and combine it with one of Steve Harvey's lines. Your purpose is to get up in the morning and be grateful for your daily bread, and take the pieces that show up for you and arrange them in such a way that you live fearlessly, knowing that God is taking care of the details. The details are none of your business. Our business is to imagine and to ask and be receptive, be ready, stop chasing after things, ask God for what you want one time and know that God's taking it from there, and then create your affirmations and use your affirmations to keep you in your heart. And by doing that, you'll discover what your gift is, right? I mean, that's why so very few people follow their hearts, because that seems like a lot of work. It really isn't, but it can seem like a lot of work, But every day I walk in the morning, and I say my affirmations. I say my simple scriptures, and I repeat my affirmations over and over and over. But I'm not asking God. If I have something to ask God, I ask God one time and I leave it. So God's taking it from there. That's your fearless faith, having fearless faith, non-resistance, and love, knowing all the while that your word is your wand, your wand that sprinkles the pixie dust. Your word is your wand. There's one other story I can tell you quickly. which is very dramatic if you'd like me to share it.
Sure, if you have the time.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, when I was in college in 1969, or 1967, actually, the fall of 1967, I was a very shy person. And so I didn't go out to make friends, and I was an anthropology major. But this Mexican lady befriended me. And, where I went to college was very close to the border. So a lot of the kids from Mexico would come up to go to college and then drive back home every day. And so her name was Magdalene. Now, I had taken 3 years of Spanish, high school Spanish. I had a lot of Hispanic friends. I had never heard the word Magdalene. That was just an uncommon name, but her name was Magdalene. And she had this long black hair that went down past her buttocks, straight, looked like silk. She was from a very well-to-do family. She had this, in the anthropology people out there, she had this Aztec nose, just this regal nose. I mean, if there was a room full of people and she were to walk into the room, people would stop and look at her. That's how beautiful she was. But she also had a beautiful heart. For some reason, she befriended me, right? And when she was an art major, we never had any classes together, but in between classes, we would spend time together. Well, it was 1967, going into 1968, and the Johnson administration began drafting college students for the Vietnam War. So I had a choice. I grew up in San Diego. I could move to Canada where it snows. I could burn my draft card, or I could enlist and hopefully avoid being a grunt in the rice paddies in Vietnam. Well, I had a friend that wanted to enlist, and I was homeless at this time. My father had kicked me out of the house, so I was living in a tent in the backyard of a friend. I thought, maybe I'll just enlist. And these things happen so quickly. So the last time I saw Magdalene, I was in the parking lot of the college. I had just gotten some books out of the trunk of my car, and I was walking back to classes. And her car pulled over with 5 of her friends. And she always sat in the back seat between 2 friends. So the car was pulling out, and Magdalene didn't see me, but her friend saw me. So she taps Magdalene on the arm, whispers something to her, and Magdalene turns completely around in the seat. I mean, completely around, and just smile from ear to ear. And she's waving goodbye to me. She's thinking she's waving goodbye for the weekend because everything was happening so fast. I thought I was going to see her again to tell her what was happening. I didn't. That was the last time I saw her. Well, I enlist, and I get about a year of training and intelligence, uh, Morse code interception, and I'm sent to Vietnam. I'm going to Play Coup, which is in the central highlands of Vietnam, which I didn't know from Timbuktu, But when I got into Vietnam, I had to stay in Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, for a week to wait for my paperwork to come through before I could get to Play Coup. And so everybody knows you're new because you're clean, right? And so everybody's asking me, especially the South Vietnamese. Everyone I run into, they said, where are you going to be stationed? And I say Play Coup. And every time I say Play Coup, every single one of them said, oh no, that's the worst place, the most dangerous place in South Vietnam. You can't go there. And I'm thinking, what do you mean I can't go there? That's where I'm going. So I get to Play Coup, and I didn't know at the time, but I learned later. But a month before I got to Play Coup, they hired the local people to come on the base to do laundry and stuff like that. They must have had a spy because the month I got there, when you go on alert, you have to scramble out of your barracks and down into and run down between the barracks into the bunkers. Well, they logged these mortars right down. They walked those mortars right down that runway. They knew exactly where to place them. A bunch of guys were killed. A bunch of guys were wounded. When I got there, May of 1969, May of 1970, I spent a year there. We never got hit. The air base next to us got hit 2 or 3 times a week, which began to really upset us because every time they got hit, we had to go on alert. So if it's 2 in the morning and the sirens go off, you got to get your helmet, your flak vest, your weapon, everything, and get out and go down into the bunkers. And so that's how dangerous it was. We became very complacent because, oh yeah, okay, they're going to hit the airbase again, right? And they very well could have hit us. And we worked out of these trailers because we intercepted the communications from Hanoi, the North Vietnam, to the guerrilla units in the South. We would intercept those and give all that information to our troops on the ground. So they knew what the Viet Cong were up to. Well, so it was very classified. So we worked in these trailers on these huge trucks. So if we ever got overrun, the trucks could be leaving while we would be destroying everything inside. Well, for the whole year I was there, we never took any truck hits. So it's my time to leave. And I go back. I have to spend another week in Saigon, wait for my paperwork. While I'm in Saigon, I get a phone call saying that the trailer I worked in took a direct hit. Oh, no. 3 of my friends I worked side by side with were killed. And I'm thinking, why? I didn't know what to make of that. Well, a couple of years ago, I'm having doubts again, right? And Maggie says, look up Magdalene. Now, I hadn't thought of Magdalene in decades, right? Just out of the blue, she says, look up Magdalene. So I look up Magdalene and it says flower. And I think, okay, yeah, she was like a flower. That makes sense. So the next morning, Maggie says, look up Magdalene. I said, well, I looked her up. She says, look her up again and use a different source. So I used a different source and I looked up Magdalene, derivative of Magdalena. And Maggie said, when she turned around and looked at you and smiled at you that day, you were going to be protected in Vietnam. I still get shivers when I tell
I know, I just had shivers listening to you say that.
I mean, but again, your angels will set you up with these events. So later on, they know you're going to have these doubts. So they have a reference point. You remember that? Okay, stop doubting. And it almost becomes a fun game after a while,
Those are, I've been mesmerized this whole hour that we've been talking, but we are actually up on time. So I want to give you the opportunity to share with my listeners how they can find your books and connect with you.
Thank you so much. My website is JMM Love, J for Joseph, MM for Mary Magdalene, or Mary and Maggie, doesn't matter. JMMlove.com, that's my website. You can connect to me there on social media and find all my books there. But if you're interested in my most popular book, it's The Power of Angels, Volume 3. If you search that at Amazon, make sure you put Volume 3, The Power of Angels, Volume 3. If you don't put volume 3, hundreds of books come up. If you put The Power of Angels volume 3, my book will come up. And on the back of it, it has a picture of Angelina. And it's my most popular book. And so you can get it there in ebook or paperback. And if your listeners feel encouraged to begin sharing their angel stories and they're intimidated still, you can connect. They can connect with me through my website, or my email is joseph@jmmlove.com. They can share their angel stories with me if they feel safe doing that. And I won't share them with anybody, but that will help encourage them to start coming out of their angel closet. I'm more than welcome to receive their emails. Or if they have questions about anything, I'm always happy to talk to people who, want to listen to the rhythm of their heart. It's such a beautiful song. Listeners, if you go to YouTube and put in the Rhythm of Your Heart, Rod Stewart, he's got a video of that. It's a beautiful video. It includes um, Penny Lancaster. At the time was his girlfriend, but now is his wife. But it's just, you can see how much in love they are. And it's just a beautiful video. And it's at the Royal Albert Hall. So it's a beautiful setting. But that's one of the songs that I use to keep me in my heart, and just, get on your path, start daring to ask God what your gift is. And just ask, and then be receptive, be receptive, because you don't know how God is going to tell you, or your angels. Angels are just messengers of God. So sometimes God will use angels or use earth angels. Maggie or Magdalene is an earth angel. So your angels will often use earth angels to communicate with you. So anyway.
Well, I want to thank you so much. Like I said, I had shivers almost the entire hour. So I really enjoyed having you on the program today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for doing what you're doing, Angela. It's a
Thank
great
you.
gift to the world.
Well, we will be right back after this ridiculously short break. Are you enjoying this podcast and want to help this lady out? Well, share it with friends, or even better, leave a review on iTunes. We'd love to hear from you. Now back to the show. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, I thought this was a really great follow-up, especially when he talks today about fierce faith. And last week when I spoke with Andrew Martin, we talked about, setting our intentions and then having no doubt that they will be taken care of. So I thought what he said today dovetailed just nicely with the conversation I had in the last episode with Andrew Martin. So if you haven't checked that out, I suggest that you do. Well, that's it for today's episode. Take care and seek the mystery.